why do the Christians that believe, the type of Christians that believe the Bible is literal, that it's a true account of all of God's deeds, how can they believe that he is good when he does so many atrocious acts in the Bible? Do you have any ideas on that? Like, why people believe that?
Okay, I'm going to have to preface this as one quick exception. Despite people who claim that they believe the Bible literally, I've never met a single person who actually literally believed everything in the Bible. And I think it may actually be an impossibility. But for the people who generally think that the Bible is accurate and that, you know, God did this and God did that, and that these are accurate representations of the character, they don't have a good answer. What the only thing that, or I was going to say the best thing, but it's really not that way. There's one option, and that's this idea of divine command. And that is that whatever God says or does is necessarily morally right. It doesn't matter what our perception of that act was, because we are unable to see the big picture the way a God can. And this is, so the question that I usually had to follow up with this is, okay, does that mean that if it was moral for God to do this, would it be moral for a person to do this as well?
Right.
And if the answer is no, then you're claiming that there's one set of morals for a God, or this God, and they're at his whim to change or do however he wants, and another set of morals that govern us and our behavior. And I reject that out of hand. The idea that it would be, you know, I realize that we can discuss the difference in situational ethics and things like that, but the idea that it would be immoral of me to kill someone, and yet if you replace me with God in those exact same circumstances, it would be morally correct for God to do it. I reject that.
Right. Well, I mean, the shorter version of that is just, you know, someone who takes a leadership position of do as I say, not as I do, loses the moral high ground, and I think loses the moral authority. And also that argument, that defense of, you know, God's atrocities or what have you, essentially is supporting the notion of might makes right. Which I think you can also claim to have serious moral objections to.
It's the I brought you into this world, I can take you out thing. And there are people who think that, okay, in the flood, God actually did flood the entire world except for those 8 people and animals on the ark. And that's because everybody else had it coming. They were really bad and they deserved it. And, you know, the typical response immediately is, okay, so you're talking about even the little babies that drowned deserved that too? Well, you know, in the sense that they were part of this society, and God knew that they were going to grow up to be bad.
They're the result of fornication, and therefore tainted.
Well, if God knows that they're going to grow up to be bad, he knows what everybody's going to be doing. He knows what, you know, it's absurd. You cannot get to a coherent position that doesn't just make a flat exception, a bit of special pleading for the God character. And I can't buy it. So to answer your question, I have no idea what answer they could possibly come up with that would even be remotely acceptable.
Well, I had some conversations like this with Christians back when I was hosting the show in the day, before it was this big internet phenomenon. It was a local access show that maybe 25, 30 people were watching, but we would get Christian callers, and we would bring up, for example, one example of a godly atrocity in the Bible is in 2 Kings chapter 2, verse 23 to 24, the sending the bears to slaughter 42 children because...
I actually pointed that out to her specifically.
And let me guess. If she answered you,
there's several options.
Yeah. The response that I got was, suddenly the Bible starts saying whatever they want it to say at this point.
Yeah.
You know, the big book of multiple choice becomes the big book of choose your own adventure at this stage, because suddenly the children become this gang of youths, dangerous. You know, suddenly they're no longer children; they're these 17, 18-year-old tough punks.
They're crips.
Yeah, and they're out to do bodily harm to the prophet Elijah.
Yeah.
When, of course, that's not actually what the scripture says. And I went, you know, you can go online. In fact, if you go to BibleGateway.com, right there's something like 20 different translations of the Bible.
The thing
and
is,
I just picked a dozen at random, and I think all but one of them, translated the word as children. Only maybe 1 or 2 translated as youths, which you could argue might say, all right, it's not necessarily children, but
it's possible that it may actually, even if it is a valid translation and meant a gang of youths, so what? How is it just
to send bears to slaughter them?
Bears to kill them? Where had they done anything other than name calling at this point?
No, they hadn't. There's nothing in there that says it. But again, in the inventive interpretations that you'll get, suddenly they're out chasing him with bats and bricks and
we're going to bash your head in
and Glocks and whatever whatever they had back then. So you just get these tortured reinterpretations. Everything you have to remember, in the mind of the believer, God's always got to win.
Yeah.
So, and if this is all about just when you get down to making stuff up.
Yeah, if you begin with the preconception that everything God does is necessarily morally right, then you can go back and you can spin the story in such a way where either you can make it kind of maybe seem like it was morally right, or maybe you can come up with some possibilities for, even though you don't completely understand the situation, there may have been something morally right about it. No, there wasn't. The story, first of all, is absurd. It never happened. But there's nothing morally right about it. There's nothing, it's like, we brought up before this idea where Abraham is asked to sacrifice his oldest son, and he goes and he takes it and he binds and does it, and God intervenes at the last second in order to save the kid.
Just kidding.
And everybody looks at this and says, wow, see how great? I mean, he spared this kid. Hello. He called for the kid's death in the first place. Yes, but he never intended to actually let him go through with it.
It was a test. Well, what kind of moral being puts you through a test
Let me tell you about tests. If I'm going to test my kid to see whether or not he'll do whatever I say, that's kind of stupid. But if I'm trying to test my kid to see, there's two aspects of this. There's the test to see if you'll do whatever I say, which I would say is immoral. I don't care if it's a God doing it or not. If there is a God and he comes to me and he says, hey, guess what? I need you to kill your friend. No. Thanks for playing. Move on to the next sucker. But the other thing is that in order for the individual, in this case Abraham, to go along with this, he had to be of the mindset that it was within God's character to actually ask him to sacrifice his son. If he thought that God was good and would never ask for a human sacrifice, then the correct response from Abraham is, clearly you are not the God I worship. My God would never ask me to do anything like that. Therefore you are a demon and you're trying to fool me, and I refuse to fall into your trap. Ha ha ha. That's what somebody does when they believe in a God that is good, that would never ask for human sacrifice. What does Abraham do? Boom. My God is the kind of God that would ask for human sacrifice, and I believe he just did, and so I'm going to take my son up there, and I'm going to prepare, and I'm going to kill him.
Because whatever my God asks must be necessarily right, even though it would be evil otherwise. Yeah. Therefore, might makes right. You get back to this might makes right religion.
But it demonstrates that the ancient, to some of the ancient Israelites, the idea that of God being above human sacrifice or requesting human sacrifice is false. They had it in their zeitgeist that God could and would ask for this, and that's you can't have the Abraham story